Seriously? Okay, so I rarely do any sort of opinion videos or anything like that on this channel, but this one definitely affects what has been considered the cornerstone of this channel, as well as one of my favorite modern games, and that's DEATHGARDEN. And what's going on is I was filled in maybe a week ago that there were going to be some changes to DEATHGARDEN that hopefully would appeal to a lot more people, would bring in some interest, some more gamers, and that kind of made me hopeful that maybe it was just going to be a drastic price cut or a free-to-play model where most of the funding comes from downloadable content, suits, and stuff like that. Kind of like Dead by Daylight, but Dead by Daylight's not free. I was kind of right. It doesn't have anything to do with the price model. It has to do with Dead by Daylight, in that this is kind of going to become Dead by Daylight.
Not about winning, it's about staying alive. It's about how long can you stay alive. It's about how much can you gather, how much can you get before you are eventually killed.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's a bad thing, only because I don't really know what the direction is going forward. They haven't really revealed much beyond a couple of stills. And what stills they have shown does show a far creepier version of DEATHGARDEN. They're talking about trying to make it darker, sinister, evil. Kind of like living up to the original initial vision that they had going forward with DEATHGARDEN. And to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of not digging the idea. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I love horror. I love very dark, sinister, bloody, gory things in a fictional realm. But DEATHGARDEN was always one of those games I could easily hop into, and it felt more grindhouse than it did horror. And that's simply because of the whole idea of a dystopian future, and that's why I fell in love with it. You rarely see these kind of grindhouse style games, or even early 70s, 80s, 60s sci-fi, you could argue, but more so 70s and 80s, exploitation, that kind of stuff. That's the vibe I got from the game, and I loved it. That's why I've put so much time into it, and it kills me that the game has essentially died, for lack of a better term. In 2 weeks, I have not been able to play a single game. Doesn't matter what time of day, I'm not able to get a game going, and that's why the videos have stopped on this channel. So the game going full-blown horror at this point, and I'm not really behind it. I don't quite think it works from what I've seen of the gameplay, which means they're going to have to change up the gameplay. That's not really what I want. They're basically doing a drastic overhaul in early access, and I understand why, because again, the game is essentially dead. But the main issue is the $30 price point for it. A lot of people don't want to shell it out. So instead of focusing on expanding what they already have, they're going to make everything darker, bloodier. Like I said, they're going to focus more on terrifying evil hunters, be more along the lines of your standard slasher-looking kind of killer, kind of what Dead by Daylight has.
Well, the hunters need to be these terrifying things that strike fear silhouette-wise into the hearts of the runners.
And then the runners are going to have their own personalities.
But for the runners, they all need to be individual characters. Each person who's come to this trial comes from a different backstory. They have a different reason to be there. And this is going to be really important because each character will have their own backstory, have their own name and lore and series of outfits that they can dress up in.
Okay, that I can kind of get behind because honestly, the runners for the most part just kind of look like one another with different masks and different suits. That I think is a bit of an upgrade. The hunters themselves I thought were okay for a sci-fi dystopian universe. I don't necessarily run Hunter, but I think them and the powers were fine. They're talking about player progression, which I guess is going to be on par with Dead by Daylight again, because they say in the video that the main focus now is going to be on survival. I don't want that. DEATHGARDEN is one of those that stood out because of how drastically different it was compared to Dead by Daylight. And it saddens me to hear that they're actually just going to go forward and trying to make the game more like their flagship title. It makes sense considering the game is floundering so bad. They're trying to appeal to a broader audience, and the broader audience being the Dead by Daylight audience, but which is not something I'm really looking forward to because honestly, most, not all, maybe not even most, a good majority of the Dead by Daylight community is just toxic. Toxic, as fuck. And I don't really want that community in DEATHGARDEN. I understand the game is not for me. They didn't design the game for me, and this is their vision. I'm cool with it. I want to see them succeed, and I want to see the game succeed. I just don't want to see what they've already built be scrapped entirely, because there is a steady foundation that enjoy what it is. There's just not enough to actually make it playable. And therein lies the problem. So they're going to, from what I'm understanding from the video itself, they're scrapping everything. And they're going to refine it based around a Dead by Daylight model in an asymmetrical gameplay arena. And I'm not too keen on that personally. As for the characters, one thing they could have done was maybe implement certain characters have certain abilities. I do get there's 3 different kinds. There's a healer, you have the control, you have torment. I get that. But one thing is all the perks that you can pick at the very start, every single runner gets the same perk. Every hunter has similar perks. If the perks were more oriented towards the character and not just a broad outline of, hey, here's this, here's this, here's this, pick what you're doing, that would be awesome. I would like more refined perks per runner. That, I think, would definitely help out more, because that would give a sense of, hey, this runner in particular actually does something the others don't. That was always one of my main hang-ups about being a runner. We all essentially could do the same thing, and it was more like personal choice as to how we're going to do it. That, I think, is one of the major things they could have updated on or upgraded, but they didn't. And the initial plan was to roll out new perks as time goes on. But, I mean, that just didn't quite happen. We got one, I think, since the game launched. One for the hunter, one for the runners. I think that's what it was. It seemed like a very slow output, not for the updates, but just additional material that would make the experience a little more enjoyable and maybe a little more personal. But one thing about this is, if you watch the video, they're talking about softening a few things.
We're looking to try and soften 2 key areas of the game. The first one is the sense of personal reward in the game. So this is the idea that whatever you do as an individual in the game, whether you're a runner or a hunter, you get rewarded for your actions. And the second part is linked to it too. And we're exploring the idea of cracking the team play of the game.
Crack the team dynamic of the runners. And that's one of the key things about the game that I loved so much. It wasn't a one-on-one survival kind of thing, like one against all, but you gotta work together. I like that in Dead by Daylight because of the situation that your characters are put in. Not in DEATHGARDEN. DEATHGARDEN, I liked the team dynamic. You work together, you try to escape the arena. That's what the game was. So by changing that core dynamic, kind of just defeats the purpose of what DEATHGARDEN initially set out to do. So really, DEATHGARDEN in itself is not going to be DEATHGARDEN anymore. And I'm not really... It's not that I'm not liking the idea, I'm hesitant towards it. Because it really is trying to do something completely different than what we already know, what we love. The community, I mean, what the community enjoys and embraces about the game. So there you go. That's, to me, that kind of just kills DEATHGARDEN in a way. It's not the game we have come to know, expect, and it's gonna be, I guess, Dead by Daylight all over again. We have enough of those kind of games. There's Dead by Daylight, there's White Noise 2, which is not quite the same, but the same dynamics. There's Last Year coming out. There's Run or Die. We have enough games like that. And the multiplayer aspect, the team aspect of DEATHGARDEN really made it stand out. So for them to go and completely redo the entire thing really just... I woke up to that message and I felt stabbed. I've been with the game since, I think it was closed beta, closed alpha, I forget. It's been so long. I was there right from the very start, and I absolutely love this game. It's one of those that you can just pop on real quick, you find a team, you go in, you have your fun, and the matches last between like 5 to 15 minutes depending on team skill base. And that's kind of what made the game interesting every time. It was reliant on the team, and it had everything to do with the team's abilities and skill level and whatnot, how familiar they are with it. And it was just a lot of fun because it always changed based on that aspect. So changing it and focusing it more on the individuals, that kind of just makes the experience the same thing. It's redundant in a way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of Dead by Daylight overall. You focus on the one person trying to help out the group, but it all has to do with every person's contribution in their own way. And it takes forever to actually do a match. Some matches I've been in have taken 40, 45 minutes. Granted, some like 15, 20. But it's just such a slow pace. You have to focus on stealth, and every player has not just their part, but everybody does everything. You could either work together or you do them separately. But for the most part, you're all trying to get the generators and get out. Whereas Death Garden, you don't attack the hunter, but you have to delay. And that's what Control is for. Control is the one that's supposed to run up and fight him or distract him somehow. Torment completely destroys and messes with him. And then you got the healers. And the healers are the ones that help the others. So it's in a way like a RPG sort of setup. And that's what works so perfectly with Death Garden. So going in and changing all those fundamentals just kind of makes it another basic horror survival game. And that's not what I fell in love with. Will I follow the game? Am I going to be happy, especially if it gets a player base? I'll follow it. I'll give it a shot, but I don't know. I think they just, as far as I go, I think they might very well have just lost me as a dedicated player. I understand drastic times call for drastic measures. Trust me, I do. And I've put so much time into the game, I'm going to follow it and see what happens. But I'm definitely not happy about the update that just came out. Not update to the game. The updates like that haven't come out. The developer update, so to speak. Very disappointed, very let down. And I depending on what happens, I don't know if you're going to end up seeing Death Garden on the channel. And probably won't for a little while anyhow because there's no player base. But overall, yeah, just stay tuned, I guess is the only thing I could say. If you wanted to see some changes to Death Garden, you got your wish. Hope you're happy. I sure as hell am not.